I was very interested in Eastern Europe because my father had been a great admirer of Paderewski, a one-time president of Poland who had been a musician, and my father played the piano as a hobby. My father was very interested in military history and the history of the Second World War and was a great admirer of General Sikorski. And then for 27 years I lived beside Jan Czak, who was Polish with an Irish wife. So I became involved with the Irish Polish Society about 17 years ago, just as an ordinary member, and then about 14 years ago I became a committee member. So I've remained just a committee member. I'm not looking for any position. I don't want to be chairman, I don't want to be vice chairman, I don't want to be secretary. And then I felt very embarrassed about the fact that I had never actually been to Poland, although I knew a lot about it. When I was looking at Poland here, I was looking at photographs of the Royal Palace, and looking at photographs of Warsaw, and looking at Wawel Palace, and looking at Krakow. But when I went over there, I discovered that there were roads that were broken, that there were cars 15 years old, that a huge number of people had already left Poland, that it was just adjusting from the change from being a communist satellite to being a member of the European Union. This is a difficult transition to make, and we had the same problem ourselves in Ireland, say 35 years ago. Now, I was astonished at the size of the country, coming from a country of 4 million. It's very strange to suddenly find yourself living and working in a country with 40 million. Huge distances. And as I said, we were traveling by road, by car, or by bus, so I was seeing huge areas. And I was conscious of vast areas with nobody living in them, vast areas of forests, vast areas of farmland with no animals in sight, because mostly the animals are pigs and they're indoors. And from time to time we'd see a few cows. But it's always different when you go there, because I didn't realize that at Christmas it would be -20°C, and I didn't realize that at Christmas when we were there we'd be trapped in the airport for several days because there was 600 millimeters of snow and the planes couldn't take off. So you don't read this in a book about a country, or if you do, you don't assimilate it. I was very lucky to be asked to go to Poland by Jan Kaminski, who wanted an Irish architect to represent him over there and get things done his way on projects he's working on there. And we've been there for 15 times, 15 visits so far, and say the last 15 months we're there every month. Sometimes we're there for 2 days, sometimes we're there for 8 days. So sometimes I have a bit of spare time. We have meetings with builders, with architects, with solicitors, with planning consultants, and I might find between 2 meetings that there was 3 hours. So Jan might go back to the hotel and read, and I'd wander down to the old parts of Bielsko-Biała, which is really 2 towns, one on each side of a river, Bielsko and Biała. And whereas there are a lot of modern buildings on the outskirts, I have found the older buildings more interesting because they have history behind them. And some of them were palaces, some of them are museums, some of them are churches, some of them are schools, monasteries. So I've concentrated on those, and I've done them just because I was there. And normally I colour all my drawings. And that's because a lot of them I would do when I'd be on holidays. But this time I could never spend more than 2 or 3 hours in any one sketch. And my dread all the time is that my mobile phone would ring, and my client would be saying to me, "Quick, you have to meet the auctioneer now. Wherever you're doing, stop, come back up to the hotel at once, we're going." When we fly into Poland, we either fly into Warsaw or we fly into Krakow, and then we go by car. One of the advantages that I have is we travel a lot by car because my client hires a car and a driver. And this means we're driving along roads, not necessarily big auto routes, but they might be small roads, or we might travel by bus or travel by train. So I'm looking at the backs of buildings, I'm looking at derelict factories, I'm looking at new housing schemes, I'm looking at communist period apartment blocks, so I see quite a lot. Some of the drawings are done in Krakow, and when I've been in Krakow, when I've been in Warsaw, although there are lots of modern buildings on the outskirts, and even lots of modern buildings in parts of the city centres, I found myself drawn to the historic buildings, the old palaces, the monasteries, the cathedrals, all of which have been lovingly restored by a very proud country, very proud of its heritage, and they poured money into restoring old buildings. And some of the old buildings now are far better than they ever were, because now they put in double glazing, and they put in heating, and they put in toilets, and they've left out some of the defects. Well, speaking now as an architect, it has to be the architectural composition. The building by itself is of no interest to me. it has to be in its setting. So one of the best ones is the old part of Bielsko Biała showing the steps that join two different levels, because that's very atmospheric. And there's a combination of buildings from different periods, different styles, joined together by steps, because a lot of these places start off as maybe a walled city or a walled town with a wall around it. Like one of my drawings is at the old wall around Warsaw, and there's only a bit of it left. But the composition has to be interesting. A building by itself doesn't interest me at all, because often that's just an architect's dream of himself being famous with his own building. I like to see it in context. So it has to fit into the surroundings. So therefore, some of these older areas, they were working with the same materials, they were working with limited technology, so there was a greater sense of harmony. And now, unfortunately, a lot of architects, including myself at times, want to make a personal statement and want their building to stand out, hoping it will be noticed by history and posterity. Everything I've drawn here was either built in brick or stone, and cement rendered or stuccoed. And now you can build in aluminium or steel or concrete or glass. So there are so many different varieties of material now that all the buildings naturally look very different. But whereas a lot of these buildings in my sketches are built to different periods, they're all built with similar materials. So they unify themselves, and the composition unifies itself by the fact that the materials are very limited. But now you can find a dark tinted glass building with stainless steel piers. Beside you can find a concrete one with green glass. Beside that you can find one that's all in aluminium. So there's no harmony. So speaking now as an artist rather than an architect, I'm attracted more to the historic cores of old cities, where there's harmony and unity based on materials, even though the buildings are very different. When I'm doing these sketches, there's something of tremendous importance. I have to find a coffee shop nearby that has a table outside on a terrace where I can sit at a table, because I am doing these on a sketching pad on my knee, and I could be 2 hours. So the ideal thing is I find some place like a town centre where there are a couple of outside coffee shops, and I have a coffee and maybe a cake, and I sit there. So when I be looking at these, there might be advertisements for beer or cigarettes, or there might be signs saying no entry or no parking, or there might be a sign saying for sale. I leave all those out. So mine are, in a sense, glamorized or sanitized version of what's there. Some of the places I've drawn, if you took a photograph, they show signs saying no entry, car park, parking prohibited, parking limited, or there might be a sign saying beer or cigarettes or stay in the hotel, and I leave all this out. Well, I'm an observer. You see, I don't speak the language. So when I'm in a country, now I speak some German and I speak French and I speak Spanish, and then some countries I've worked in, like Malaysia, the working language there actually is English. But when I've been in Poland and I've been by myself, when I'd be by myself and doing these sketches, I am only a spectator. So I'm looking at what I can see, I'm smelling, I'm observing, I'm looking at the people, I'm looking at the age of the cars, I'm looking at the signs, I'm looking at the condition of the footpaths, I'm looking at the windows, and I'm really recording what I see at that point in time. So of course I'm recording an older part, but I could be down in the new business district of Warsaw doing drawings of banks and building societies and insurance companies. People are very interested in atmospheric impressions of other countries. They have a nostalgia about them. Now, speaking as an architect who does old buildings and new buildings, I have looked at beautiful new buildings over there too, especially in the centre of Warsaw, where there's a lot of new development around the bus station and around the Communist Palace of Culture, but they're not photogenic. They're too tall, or they're by themselves, or they're beside another building that's in conflict. There's a whole strip in Warsaw where every international style is exemplified in every famous international hotel, all designed by their own architects, say from Scandinavia, or from America, or from Britain or France.